Welcome back. Best-selling author of The Life of Pi, Yann Martel, currently lives in Saskatoon. He's working on a new book that will cover the events of the Holocaust. Here's the final segment of my interview with Man Booker Prize winner, Yann Martel. You talk about the fact that you go to weekly mass, or I don't know how often you do that, but you mass weekly, and you also talk about the beauty of the Muslim prayers. Do you pray to Allah? Do you use the word Allah when you do?
Well, I'm a Westerner, as I said. Right now I'm going to Anglican Church in Saskatoon because it happens to be a wonderful church. The minister is just a wonderful man who really seems to be in the spirit of Christ, and that's very attractive. But yes, if all the religions that I've seen, and as I said, you have to exclude the negative things. So Islam, traditionally, historically, has had a problem with women, for example. But if you stop at that, it'd be like saying democracy, you know, democracy gave us George Bush, therefore I give up on democracy. No, you don't give up on anything. So Islam, of all the religions that I've seen, the one that in its practice I find the most uplifting is Islam. There's a socialness to it. You know, in Islam there's a concept called the Ummah, which is the nation of Islam. And so to Muslims, every Muslim counts. So a Muslim in New Zealand is concerned about Muslims in Holland, is concerned about Muslim in... there really is that tangible sense of a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And when you see 500 people praying the way they pray, and it's a very physical prayer, you know, on their knees, forehead to the ground, to say that they are humble and to connect with the ground, it's really moving. And it's really profoundly social. You know, one of the things that Muhammad said was that Jesus, because of course Muhammad recognized all the other prophets.
He was the final prophet.
Exactly. So of Jesus he said, you know, he taught us how to love. But in Islam Jesus taught us the importance of loving, but in Islam we teach you how to love. Which is why it's so full of technical little details about the worth of a widow. Now, it was written in the 8th century. Islam needs a renaissance. Islam needs a modernizing wind to go through it.
Is that why, I mean, so many people when they hear Islam in the West, again, we're calloused. We have this, there's fear around that.
Yeah.
So why is it that there's such a, people don't, if it is as you say, Islam is about teaching people how to love, why isn't that what they're known for?
Well, history. You know, they've been colonized and battered by the West for centuries. That's not blaming them. To blame themselves, they failed to encounter modernity. In a sense, Islam has failed to enter history. They still consider themselves outside of history, like time has stopped. And so they still view themselves as being in the 8th century. So for example, one wonderful concept of Islam is Sharia, which usually has people freaking out.
Right. Oh my goodness, these laws are going to institute.
Now the problem is, because the Sharia that we're talking about that's trying to be shoved down our throats by medieval clerics are precisely medieval. It's medieval Sharia. Sharia has 4 aspects to it. You know, Sharia has the Quran. Let's say question of artificial insemination. Well, the proper Muslim would say, okay, what does the Quran say about artificial insemination? Obviously, it says nothing.
Right.
Okay, then there's the Hadith, the sayings of Muhammad. What did Muhammad happen to say about artificial insemination? Obviously nothing. He wasn't aware of it. There's 2 other pillars of Sharia that are ignored. One is, and I forget the 2 words for them, but one is independent reasoning. I think it's called ilim. What do you think? Using the spirit of Islam, what do you think about artificial insemination? And if you're not sure, then there's what does the community think? And all 4 of those pillars together form Sharia. So you could perfectly have a postmodern Swedish kind of Sharia enlightened by, you know, what people in modern-day Sweden think in the sense of community,
and all the other kind
using
of
science and technology, but, you know, taking into account the Quran and the sayings of you know, keeping the spirit. The problem with Islam is, by and large, by fundamentalists, be wedded to the word of it, the literal word of it, rather than the spirit, which has to be subject to interpretation, to metaphorical lightness.
We just have a couple minutes left, but I'm really fascinated by this little project you're working on called What is Stephen Harper Reading? You started with by sending him a book with a kind of a book review challenge to him to read some of the books that you found interesting around the issue of stillness.
Yep.
What motivated you to do this, and what are you trying to accomplish with these?
Well, to remind him, and I guess in a larger way to remind society, that we're too busy. And if you're so busy, you're missing life. So I send him every 2 weeks. I started and I'm continuing. I will end doing this. Every 2 weeks I send him a book to try to say, listen, one of the ways to go deep into life is to read books. And a great book instills in you a sense of quiet, of stillness, in which you can think. Because what happens in a book is, in a very calm way, you read something that's not calm. a troubling life. So the first book I sent him, for example, is The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy, a short, blindingly brilliant masterpiece about the life and death, the life and dying of an ordinary civil servant named Ivan Ilyich. You read that book, and in a sense you've lived and you've died. And so you have that, you can, if you're open to it, you get that wisdom of what that would be like. So I think many of us in the West, not just Prime Minister Harper, many of us are deluded by our busyness. We're busy, 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 and so it must be really important. And then suddenly we're 65 years old and we say, where the hell did life go? Life, in a sense, is a process of going deep into stillness. It's not about franticness. It's very difficult in our technological, electronically driven society. But ultimately, life is about sometimes stopping, breathing deep, in a sense meditating your way to heaven. You don't rush to, you can't get to heaven in a subway.
Mr. Martel, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was an absolute privilege to discuss these ideas. I look forward to your next book, and I hope that people pick up this book, this illustrated version of Life of Pi. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you very much, Randall.
You can see for yourself what Stephen Harper is reading by visiting Yann Martel's website dedicated to the cause. The address is whatisstephenharperreading.ca. I'll be right back.